It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's the Bitchspot Report. Welcome to the Bitchspot Report, the conservative atheist podcast that's not afraid to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Every week, your hosts, Cephas and Mike, will take on the latest religious and political news and examine the world around us from a distinctly conservative and skeptical perspective. Join us now for this episode of the Bitchspot Report. You're not going to believe some of the stories we have for you today. This is episode 73 of the Bitchspot Report podcast, the conservative atheist podcast that tells it like it is and bitch slaps the absurdly liberal and religious woo monkeys. This week, gay people are possessed by fart demons. A New Age leader sues because her followers made a video of her on an anti-gay racist rant. The religious author of an anti-gay book is charged with molesting a young boy. Another young boy, I mean. Christians freak out when the actual historical evidence isn't supportive of their religious fairy tales. And plus, we have a discussion of the recent DC gun ban case and what it means for the Second Amendment in America. It's another 90 minutes of conservative atheist goodness, so stay tuned. And this week, we got one of my oldest and best friends, someone I've known for more than 30 years, and to be honest, the least religious Christian and the most conservative liberal I've ever met. He's a historian and author. Welcome, Charles. This is your first podcast, right?
Yes, it is.
All right, we got a podcast virgin here. Some of us have been doing this for a long time. So how's everybody doing this week?
I am doing perfectly fine. Had a good week. Learned just how crowded some cities can be when far too many people show up, but it's been a great week. How are you all doing?
That's why we don't go to San Diego Comic-Con anymore.
Oh, wow.
Insanity. See, we can go. He goes for free. I can go for free. We haven't gone anymore because it's in too small of a city and way too big crowds, so we don't do that anymore.
That's one of those I'd like to get to one of these days because I see where I'm a big fan of Adult Swim and I see that they're doing they do all sorts of stuff online. So just once maybe be there when they maybe do something with the Venture Brothers.
Yeah, good luck on that.
Yeah.
Well, sign up now. The tickets are probably already sold out for next year.
Probably. I mean, Chicago's got a big one when that comes along. My little brother's into comics and stuff like that, so but being stuck on the road, what can I do? You know,
yeah, you'll never make it.
I'll never make it.
Yeah.
Well, there could be some. I mean, interesting thing about a lot of the comics is how mainstream they've all become now. I mean, seriously, the days of people hiding comics, or even science fiction are long in the past. I'd say better than half the new shows coming out of Hollywood have science fiction themes.
Yeah, and plus all the big movies, they're all comic book movies and sci-fi movies and fantasy movies. You don't make money unless you're into sci-fi and fantasy and comics anymore.
And that is a problem. We did have our Christian group telling people that they were going to go to hell for reading funny books.
Yeah, did you see they had a counter protest out there? I put up some pictures of it that I found online where they had people out there holding up signs saying, these people are a bunch of freaking idiots and, these people are here telling you you're going to go to hell for reading comic books.
Yeah.
And why are these guys here on a Sunday when they should be in church? All this other crap.
Well, what gets into it, and I think this leads into the things we're going to talk about today, is there are segments of, especially what we'd call evangelical, Pentecostal, the conservative, that for some reason just seem to be terrified of just about anything you care to name.
Oh, sure.
Which is interesting because they also claim that C.S. Lewis is going to go to hell, or is actually in hell, being that he's no longer with us.
Yeah.
So these are people who are defined by their fear, I think.
Oh, definitely true.
I mean, I see it even with conspiracy stuff. The Watchmen, the movie, that has been they treat it almost like the book 1981. It's like a blueprint for what's supposed to happen in when the governments take over the world and all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, Mike, I think you're about 3 years early there.
Right. It's funny how works of fiction somehow, I don't know, it becomes part of, this is the evidence, this is the blueprint. They're showing us what they're going to do to us,
right.
type of talk. To me, it's funny. I mean, these people are afraid. Well, I mean, when you listen to Alex Jones, and I've heard him talk about Watchmen, Prometheus, I think was another one. All these movies, and they're all Illuminati hidden messages, and see, this is what they're going to do to us, and they're doing it in plain sight. Be aware and be ready for the jackbooted thugs to bust through our doors,
No, the caped superheroes to come busting through our door.
Although, I don't know. I mean, if Prometheus was part of the Illuminati's plan, I think they need to get their money back.
Yeah. Well, pretty much anything that comes out of Hollywood, there's something always in there. And if it's a popular movie, like Avatar, I think was another one that was targeted, if it has that one little thing, they run with it. Hopefully it sticks. If it doesn't, okay, they move on to the next movie that comes out that's popular. Go after it. It's one of those things I deal with all the time when I'm doing this research for for my show. There's always something. Now, rap music, they're flashing Illuminati symbols on videos and stuff. And, it's like, I don't get it. I don't get what they're doing, why they're doing it, but it's pretty obvious. It's just to get people to listen to them and, buy their videos and stuff off their websites.
Yeah. But we've talked about that a lot before where, these people they're out to make a buck, and, if they can load a pile of BS on people and make them buy their stuff, they're entirely happy to do that.
Scare 'em.
And they even, I think there were 2 new movies came out. One was a Christian movie, did horribly. It was like a 0 on Rotten Tomatoes. And then the other one, I think, was D'Souza. He brought something out that did not do very well. And in both cases, a lot of times they argue that, okay, this is Hollywood showing the conspiracy. That these movies were somehow made to not do well, as if, I don't know, jackbooted thugs forcing people not to see the movie.
Yeah.
And,
maybe the idea was these movies really sucked.
Yeah.
That was your problem.
And of course, one of the oldest things in Hollywood, I mean, when they talk about them trying to crush movies, one of the oldest marketing drives in Hollywood has been to put out a movie that will get people upset. They'll show they'll run around with their signs, you take a picture, and you get free publicity on the front page for your new movie.
Right.
And so, I don't see any conspiracy in Hollywood. It's just that a lot of these movies, like you said, don't sell. People aren't interested in going and seeing them.
Yes, that's the Last Temptation of Christ effect, where, that movie never would have made any money. It would have just been something that went in and went out the same weekend, but all the Christians out there picketing and whining and bitching and complaining made it a huge success. Yeah, guys, go ahead. It's like Noah. Stupid ass movie, but it never would have made any money if it wasn't for all these people out there whining about, I don't know if I can say unrealistic, because let's be honest, it's a story about a flood. But it never would have made any money if it wasn't for these people who went out and gave it all kinds of free publicity.
Yeah. And when Noah really was, I mean, if you read it, it has nothing to do with the original tale in the Bible or the previous tales that came before. It was very much, we're going to take the name Noah, we're going to grab 4-armed rock monsters, Methuselah, and we're going to make a cross between a kung fu, wire fu movie and a fantasy film. So, and you're right, it benefited greatly from all the publicity because you had the people going to it getting very angry, and again, front page news.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to touch on something because last week we used our appearance on the Side Project Live to launch into a discussion of late posting podcasts. And I had Jim email me and explain there was a bunch of technical and personal difficulties that kind of got in the way of our episode going up on time, and he wanted to apologize. And I want to make it clear that we're not criticizing Jim or his podcast. We like Jim. We like his podcast, even if we don't agree with pretty much anything they say. He was just a very convenient jumping off point for talking about podcasts that are routinely late. So, Jim, it's not you. We like you, okay? In fact, it really got me thinking about this other podcast that I used to listen to, where they're always late. In fact, this year, this is a weekly podcast. They've put out exactly 2 episodes this entire year so far. Those are the people I'm talking about. Jim, you're safe. Don't worry about it. Everybody, go listen to Side Project Live. Really? Okay?
Yeah, I've been following the voter thing in Illinois, and it's actually a lot worse than I thought it was. And I was going through the election rules, and you know what? Some of that kind of even falls into even the Democrats and Republicans have certain limit or. It's not as bad, but it's like in the congressional districts. If your district is primarily Republican, you don't have to get as many petition signatures than the Democrats. Sometimes it's like 10-to-1 ratios between, I don't know how they come up with those numbers. I know from the charts that they have in the back of this, there's a book on how, for candidates to file petitions, and for some of these districts, the Republicans only have to get 100 signatures, where the Democrats have to get 1,000 signatures. And this is just for the particular congressional districts. Illinois is totally screwy on their ballot access.
And they're not the worst. There's actually like 2 states that are worse than they are.
Yeah, I heard Oklahoma. What's the other one?
I don't know. I just heard that it was like number 3 in the worst, most restrictive, rules.
Because I heard Oklahoma is about the same as Illinois. And if there's a third one, I'd maybe some more research. But they made it through their signature challenges. Now next week they got to go to Chicago to defend the people that were taking the petitions. If they can knock the person taking the petition off, all those signatures that he took becomes null and void. So they still have a battle going on. I mean, I don't know. Hopefully I'll find out more. It's supposed to be Tuesday of next week. They're supposed to be in Chicago, and I think Jim's going up there to partake in that. So we'll find out. Hopefully I'll find out some more on that.
Yeah.
But it's really a screwy setup in Illinois, and I guess the Greens and the Constitutions are out. So it's really just the Libertarians that are still in the running. And then when I started reading about the Republican governor who's running, he's worked every loophole in campaign financing. This guy's, I don't know if he's a billionaire, but he's got millions. He's owns parts of like the Chicago Bulls, a number of sports teams, and he's putting a lot of his own money up. He's almost got to put $1 million of his own money into his campaign, which gives him the loophole that now large outside contributors can contribute to his fund. He just got a $2.5 million donation from somebody, I don't know who, and he's collected like $5 million just from donations that, because he put his own money in over $250,000, he can take this money in. If it was under $250,000, he couldn't take those dollars.
Yeah.
I mean, really, Illinois is going to be, I don't know.
Yeah, well, honestly, I'm thinking that once Jim gets done with all of his work with the libertarian ballot stuff, I'd kind of like to have him back on the show to talk about, corruption in Chicago politics. So, Jim, if you're listening, and I know you are, let me know. Come on back on. We want you back.
I'm not sure if there is a solution right now to this problem, because, the court's already ruled that, most donations, most campaign donation controls are unconstitutional. There's still some limits, but they put some very severe limits. But I'm thinking that it may be better just to demand transparency. I mean, even if a guy's getting a ton of money, if you know where it's coming from, it gives you a good idea of who he's going to be, shall we say, more sympathetic to once he's in office.
Yeah.
Well, in Chicago, we know who that's going to be. It's going to be the Democrats.
Yeah. It would be nice that, getting people on the ballot, just getting more people on the ballot. I mean, right now, unless you're Republican or Democrat, you're not getting the ballot. Do try, expect to give up. It took them 2 weeks to go through the signatures. Now, who knows how long it's going to take to go through the petitioners. These are people who work, they work regular jobs. They don't have, they've taken 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks of vacation time. They've had to take personal time to do all this, which is, I mean, it's a shame. And quite frankly, the Republicans apparently they've paid college kids to go around to people who have signed and that they were proved that they legally signed the petitions, finding out if there's any discrepancies on the person taking the petition. And, it's like when you have bottomless money like that, and, I mean, there's really no chance for a third party to even, one, to get on a ballot, and then, with the type of, stuff that they're doing, they can't even get a voice. And that's why I'm championing this a little bit. When Jim comes up with a news report, because the news doesn't even report this. There's been very few, articles on this, and people in Illinois, I don't even think they were aware that there was this block to block out third parties. So that's why I'm kind of trying to champion it. I'm trying to do it on this show. I'm doing it on the Irreverent Skeptics. I've been forwarding all the news articles that Jim has come across, and anything I can do to get the message out that Illinois, it's a really messed up ballot. Just getting on the ballot. Now, who knows what's going to happen when they start debating and when the election advertisements start going out. Who's going to tear up on who, and that's Chicago, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're not really into the libertarian thing here, but we are into fairness and fair play, and I don't think anybody should be able to keep somebody else out just because you got more money. Right. So, I'm all in favor for them getting the Greens in the Constitution, and any party who wants to get on the ballot to get on the ballot, and then let the chips fall where they may, where people vote for who they actually support.
Yeah, give them the choice. I mean, on the show, we've been critical of all the parties, Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians. There's problems with all of them, and that's one thing. But having the right and the ability to get on a ballot and having your beliefs, your thoughts, your ideas, is it good? I mean, does this candidate really represent me? And vote for him to send him to the office. That's what we're up. We're up fairness. It's wonderful watching Quinn say, yeah, we're all for fairness, but the Democrats have, basically kicked the Greens off the ticket, or they can't run in Illinois. Fairness, I'll believe that when I see it, type.
Well, it produces another advantage in that if you let every party, if you don't put artificial barriers in the way of the party. Now, obviously, there's some parties that are just never going to get anywhere because, well, they're crazy. California has a lot of those. But, if you let a party get onto the ballot and they start doing well, even if they're not doing well enough to say win the election, it serves as a method of letting both the people and the other parties know, hey, this group has something that you may really want to consider looking into. Because if, say the Libertarians or the Greens or anyone, they manage to make a big showing, then even if they don't become a party of, federal importance, you may still get the people's will working out as the Democrats or the Republicans or whoever says, well, you know what, we're going to take that aspect of that party's platform and incorporate it into ours because people want it.
Right. Yeah. But that's what they don't want. They don't want anybody to think they have a choice. All right, well, before we get into the show proper, there's one other thing I wanted to touch on real quick. I've honestly I think I'm doing something wrong. We, like most podcasts, we don't get a lot of comments on our episodes on the website. I've noticed that about pretty much every podcast out there, is most people just don't comment on them. But I always post a link from my regular blog to the episode, and I've been getting a ton of comments there. This last week for episode 72, there were more than 230 comments on my blog related to the episode. Please, people, as much as I appreciate the attention, I provide that link as a way to inform readers of the blog that the new episode's up. I ask if you're going to comment on the episode itself, please come over to the show website and do it here. That way, everybody can see it. And I don't know, maybe this week I'll try just turning off the comments on the blog and direct people over here just to try that as an experiment. But, we provide the website as a way for people to go and discuss the episode and discuss what we say. It's probably best to keep it all in one location. So, that's just my suggestion. So, do we have anything else to cover before we get into the news?
I'm good.
You're good?
I'm fine.
I'm good.
All right, then let's do some news.
And now the news.
I know I've said you can't make this shit up in the past, but seriously, you can't make this shit up. Pastor Bert Farias of the Holy Fire Ministries claims to know the raw, naked truth about why people are gay. He claims that they're possessed by fart demons. Yes, you heard me. Fart demons. Apparently, by being gay, these people are engaging in dirty practices, and that makes them perfect targets for demons so smelly they can drive pigs to suicide. Apparently, the growing acceptance for homosexuality in America is a sign from on high that we're in the final days. Too bad religious insanity like Farias practices isn't on its way out as well. What's wrong with these people? Come on, seriously. We do this every single week, but holy shit, what's wrong with this guy?
When I saw this, I'm like, can it get any worse? And, apparently it does. Here, we got, how do you comment on this? The guy, he has no, there's just nothing firing on any cylinders upstairs. There's nothing. He's just making up stuff, and I don't know. I really don't know, and I can't even think how you can even come up with it other than, the standard, rap, homosexuality is caused by Satan and demons, so on. This was one of those articles when right before I start the show, I read through these things. I'm like, I can't comment on this. This is just too out there and unreal. And it comes down to, why do people do this? Why do they talk like this? It comes down to, do they listen to what they're saying? What are they saying? Why are they saying this? It has to be to appeal to their parishioners and get them fired up, whatever. So it's, I don't know. I really don't know where to go with this. I mean, I can't even make a dick joke out of this, you know?
Yeah. Well, it was funny because I thought this was just something he made up until I went out and did a little bit of research and find out this is actually a thing. In 2013, a lawyer sued several priests in Romania for failing to exorcise a flatulence demon from his home. I mean, things are crazy all over. Where does this crap come from?
Well, the thing that surprises me, I mean, you know, I would have to say that, you know, I can find people like this all the time. There's a fellow down in Corona that has interesting discussions with inanimate objects at times. So, you know, I'm not surprised that someone's saying this. What surprises me is that he's able to gather a congregation together to listen to this. I mean, we all have crazy people, but this is a crazy that gets people together, and I think part of it is, of course, homosexuality is pretty common. You know, many people, and if you're somebody who's uncertain, who's worried, or who has a family member, and you don't want to look at the fact that, hey, this is their choice, let's face it, a fart demon makes a great scapegoat. I mean, it's just a beautiful way to say it's something else. And I think that's kind of the game he's playing. And he may believe it himself because the fellow does not look like he is really all there in some of the pictures in the interview.
Right.
But, you know, demons, well, they're very convenient. They're incredibly convenient. Think about how succubi and incubi got started with the explaining away, you know, largely nocturnal emission. It's a convenient way to blame it on the guy downstairs, and it's very common in modern Pentecostal, modern evangelical religions.
Right. Well, this guy doesn't seem to know what is actually going on in the Bible. He claims that if you go back to the story of Jesus casting the 2,000 demons out of a man into a herd of pigs who ran into the sea and killed themselves, he claims that the pigs were so disgusted by the demons that they offed themselves rather than live with the demons. And that's not what the Bible says. All three stories in the Bible, the one Matthew 8:30-37, Mark 5:1-20, Luke 8:27-38, all three stories, none of the cases say that the pigs killed themselves because of the demons. There's no indication whatsoever that the pigs had any opinion on this at all. In every single case, it's suggested, although not directly spelled out, that the demons caused the pigs to kill themselves. So this guy is just taking the Bible going, hey, there's this story I found that I don't understand at all, and I'm just gonna twist it around until it says something that I want it to say. As such, he's a pretty damn common apologist, because most of them do that.
Yeah, you know, and of course, this is one of the things that is, you'll get Pentecostals talking about, again, how they're under attack, fewer people are going to church, etc., etc., etc. You don't need to actually ask about any conspiracy to get people out of your church when they realize that you're telling them about fart demons.
Yeah.
This fellow is just, he's quite an interesting guy. I mean, when I first saw the link, I also thought it has to be something out of Saturday Night Live with the church lady. You know, there's gotta be a skit here somewhere.
Isn't that special? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we do these stories all the time. These crazies are very, very common. That's the bad part, is this is not just some weird crazy that we found on some street corner, you know, talking to himself about, you know, him and his imaginary friends. This is like every week for us. These people are everywhere.
And, you know, of course, although we can laugh about it, the fact of the matter is that it does have a very not funny side, which is if there's someone in his congregation, and again, it's likely, depending on the size of his congregation, that there are at least a few people in the congregation that do have, you know, their GBLT, or thinking about it, it sends also a very unhealthy message and very psychologically damaging message to them. This is not the person you want to listen to if you have worries about, you know, your sexual identity.
Yeah, well, I don't think anybody sane is really listening to this guy any more than they're listening to Klingenschmidt and Tony Perkins and all the other crazies that we go through every single week. You know, the people who are convinced that there's just people casting spells on each other and demons are out there playing with their taxes. I don't know what all stories we've done in the past, but these people have some serious psychological issues. And, I mean, these people need a visit from the guys with the white coats with the arms that ties them back, because there's something wrong with these people, and unfortunately, they've gotten an audience.
Yeah, I can't add to that. I mean, like I said, this story, I thought, could this be an Onion type story or, whatever, but, we've done these stories before, and you would kind of hope that someone would say, this is just going a little too far. I mean, fart demons? I mean, I know they had the shit demon in Dogma, but, I don't know. But it's...
Yeah, he probably thinks Dogma was really... it was a documentary.
Yeah.
It's pretty sad when truth is stranger than Onion,
Yeah, I actually feel a little sorry for the writers of The Onion, because I'm certain when they started it, they didn't think they were going to have to work quite so hard to find weirder stuff than's on the regular news.
That's true. Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and get on to something else that's equally as weird.
Yeah. New Age leader sues ex-students over leaked video of her drunken, racist, anti-gay rant. The leader of a New Age consciousness and enlightenment school, who channels the voice of a 35,000-year-old Lemurian warrior when speaking to her followers, is suing two former students after they posted a drunken rant by her saying Jews have enough money to have paid their way out of the goddamn gas chambers by now, and Mexicans breed like rabbits, among other slurs. Jay-Z Knight, a 65-year-old former rodeo queen and cable TV saleswoman who heads the Ramtha School of Enlightenment in Yelm, Washington, is suing ex-students Virginia Coverdale and David McCarthy for uploading live-streamed video from a 2011 Ramtha channeling that turned into a drunken, bigoted diatribe, according to Susie Buchanan of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Using terms like, fuck God's chosen people, I think they've earned enough cash to have paid their way out of the goddamn gas chambers by now, Knight told her students. Knight explained, I'm telling you this, every goddamn Mexican family is Catholic, they are breeding like fucking rabbits, before adding that all gay men were once Catholic women. One of the reasons why I chose this story is one of my biggest concerns is that as traditional religion, they're losing people. They're going out and finding, a lot of them are turning to atheism, but what I'm concerned is that there's those that are going to people like this, and basically all they're doing is exchanging one crazy person in a pulpit talking with a different crazy person. And this doesn't sound much different than some of the racist stuff we've heard coming out of, like, the Westboro Baptist and some of the stuff we hear from Pat Robertson. This is the same stuff, it's just a different following.
Hurt the bitch.
That's what caught my interest in this story, because this is one of those groups that people will be finding their way to if they're giving up their mainstream religions and going to stuff like this, and basically all they're doing is trading one crazy.
Oh, absolutely. And it's really sad to see the Hollywood elite that are buying into this New Age bullshit. I mean, this Knight person, she's got like Selma Hayek and Linda Evans, who are currently students of hers. Seriously, people, aren't you people educated enough to see through this bullshit?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and especially you would think that from Hollywood, because, Hollywood is supposedly a very cynical, I'm not entirely certain why they feel the need to go there. I sometimes wonder if maybe it's just partially so that they can say that, okay, well, we're going to something really big, fashionable, or, I'm not entirely certain. I do know, just on the legal point, is that Washington is a two-party consent state. So she might, depending on whether or not the court rules that she had an expectation of privacy, she might be able to win the case, but she's definitely going to have a Streisand effect all over the internet if she she pursues the case.
Yeah, which I looked up. It doesn't say in the story where they were when this was recorded. I mean, they're based in Washington, but it doesn't say they were actually in Washington when they did it. Now, you're right. It's illegal under Washington state law to record unless both parties are aware of the recording. In places like California, of course, as long as one side knows, you can record up a storm and do anything you want.
Right.
So it depends kind of where they were.
And, of course, another question would be is, did Ramtha give consent? Since she's arguing that they weren't talking to her, they were talking to, Ramtha. So, I suppose you could always make the argument that, well, she didn't make consent, we weren't talking to her, we were talking to Ramtha during the drunken,
and you can't prove that he did not provide consent to the recording. Oh, I'd love to see that in court.
But, yeah, it's one of these things, It's really common in a lot of places. I mean, I think part of the factor is that, a lot of people do feel uncomfortable during many phases of their life. And I think one of the reasons it may be for why they're getting Hollywood people is, let's face it, in Hollywood, you're only as good as your last movie. And Hollywood actors are arrogant. You've got to be arrogant to think you're worth paying $2 million to for people to listen to you talk. So I think there's a lot of room there for people getting really worried, not knowing, okay, what am I going to do? And unfortunately, Hollywood actors are good actors. They're not really good anything else. You know, just as a doctor isn't an actor isn't a doctor. So there's no defense against them being, shall we say, credulous.
Yes. And we know a lot of them are.
Yeah. Tom Cruise comes to mind.
Yeah, well, unfortunately.
But yeah, I mean, he is, this is a case of, just the con came out. And I think one thing to think about here is a lot of these traditional cons or cults really thrive because, 20 or 30 years ago, it was hard to record a conversation. It was hard to make any kind of record that wouldn't be just your word against theirs. Now it's easy.
Oh, absolutely.
So.
Oh, I also think that it's hysterical that this bitch is a prepper. She falls right into that conspiracy theorist camp that, you can speak about a bit.
Yeah, doomsday preppers.
Yep.
Now, I have to admit, I have some friends who are preppers, but they generally live in Tornado Alley, and their prep is more along the lines of, do we have enough to stay, support our family for 2 or 3 weeks if our town gets turned into kindling. Then there's the other type that for some reason they spend more money. They really are waiting for the government to come after them, which I've never actually understood, because if civilization collapses and the government comes after you, how is your hole in the ground going to help you?
Yeah.
And if the government collapses, who's coming for you? To be honest, if there's no, whatever, the army's not coming after you. Your neighbors are probably coming after you because you've got all the good stuff in your bunker under your house.
And let's face it, there's probably more neighbors than there are you. And, whereas they can probably get more people, you can't get anybody else. It's just you and your weapons against everybody else. And if you got all that stuff, they're coming for your ass. And there's nothing you can do.
A fellow I know is ex-Marine, or former Marine, never ex-Marine, always former. He mentioned that the best thing, if you really are seriously a prepper, is find a rural community and get to know all your neighbors. Become friends with all your neighbors. Because that is the only way that if anything ever does seriously happen, knowing your neighbors, being part of a tight-knit community will be more helpful than any number of guns. But that's not sexy.
Yeah, and that also assumes that these people are thinking rationally, which of course they're not.
No.
We haven't had tornadoes lately, so not a lot of bad weather, but at the most I think we've been without power for like 3 days tops.
Yeah.
So I got my supply stuff. I mean, I keep charcoal so I can cook actually all the meat that's going bad in my fridge. Okay, I'm having a barbecue these next 3 days, so it's actually try to have a little bit of fun with it. And fortunately I still got paper books, so I got stuff to keep me entertained. and I'm not totally against prepping, but yeah, like some of these people just take it to such extremes that why would you want to live like, there's some that think they're ready for a nuclear bomb and, they're going to go into these, I just saw this, looks almost like a tanker truck set up. There's these, you go down a ladder, you go down this tunnel, everything's all pre-assembled, so it drops right in. And they've got it set up pretty nice, but you know what? You're going to be stuck in there for, if you're talking a nuclear bomb, a year or so, and you gotta make, hopefully that your got enough fuel, whatever, to run your generator, to run your, scrubbing equipment for, fresh air, hopefully got fuel to cook food or whatever you gotta do. I mean, a year's a long time, and, it's like, for me, it comes down to why would I want to do it? I might plan for a month, but you know what? After that, I'm going to be pretty much screwed, but I don't really see things ever getting that bad. It's, unless there's some like major catastrophe, an asteroid, which is something that we can't plan for. So why,
Yeah, but if that happens, I don't want to survive. I'm sorry. If there's a giant asteroid that's going to come by and wipe out all life on Earth, I'm painting a fucking target on myself. Hit me. Because I don't want to live through that. These people are going, we're going to live through the zombie apocalypse. We're going to be living underground while the entire human race is dead. Why? Why bother?
And you get to the problem, as a historian, part of the thing is that do you really want to try to live through a catastrophe where the rest of your life and your children's life and your children's children's life is going to be living the charming life of a medieval peasant so that hopefully 500 years from now, people can get what was messed up? Now, some people will, because, mankind next to the cockroach is probably the greatest survivor on the planet. But equally, a lot of these preppers seem to think that, the total collapse of civilization will be like a Hollywood movie, and then at some point after a month or 2 months or whatever, the credits run and you'll go down to Starbucks for a latte. And, that's not it. If we ever blow the civilization we have today, it's gonna be a really long-term thing, as in the hundreds and thousands of years.
Right, but they don't think that way. And these people are they're celebrating it. They're looking forward to it. This is what they want out of life.
Yeah.
And it's like, you guys are there's something wrong with you.
Well,
people.
yeah, and because, I've mentioned that to some people. About 3 weeks ago, I pointed to, one of the greatest signs of Western civilization, which is the playground outside of the McDonald's. We have enough resources that our children can be children, and we don't have to wait until they're 6 and throw them into something where they're trying to work, because there's just, no way to support a non-productive mouth if they're more than 6 years old. So really, when people want to say they want it all to end, I have to ask, have you read what the last 50,000 years of history have been like? This is paradise. I mean, for all the problems with the earth today, most people, especially, getting back to the religious thing, there's a reason why they talk about lands of milk and honey where you're not starving. That was paradise, and we have it.
Yeah, we do. But they're unhappy with paradise. They think, living in a hovel with no food and I always love the people who are going, yeah, I've got this generator underground where, I've got tons and tons of fuel where I can keep this thing running forever. Yeah, that's all great until somebody upstairs just walks by and stuffs a rag in your exhaust.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay, well, kiss your Wonderland Underground goodbye.
Or, when something goes wrong and you find out, congratulations, you need a part that was manufactured in China with, chromium that was imported from South Africa. So, it really is one of the things, and unfortunately, I dislike the doomsday preppers because there's a strong sense of we want to let the rest of the world burn as long as we have a lifeboat, and that's never a good adage to have.
Yeah, well, these people haven't thought through it very well. So.
No. But like I said, then you get the ones that they're just saying that, it doesn't matter if the world's collapsing. I mean, I think even the, FEMA says you should have at least 72 hours food supply. But if there's ever a major disaster, major fire, major damage to the infrastructure, it makes sense to be able to say, well, no, maybe I want to be able to sit for 2 weeks, 2 weeks before I run out of potable water and things start getting really, really bad. Because we have been blessedly immune from disasters, but then you look at what hit New Orleans with the hurricane. That was a serious case of, you want to be able to say that I can go 2 or 3 weeks without external assistance, because they had to go 2 weeks.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on to our next story.
It's shocking.
Neighbors along William Penn Court in Wilkinsburg can't believe what their neighbor, Dwayne Youngblood, is not only currently accused of, but also what he's previously been convicted of.
But Jesus was on a cross.
The 47-year-old pastor of the Higher Call World Outreach Church in Homestead is currently charged with corruption of minors after his arrest Saturday. It comes after Allegheny County police say the 47-year-old reportedly sexually abused a teenage parishioner an alleged 25 times over a period of 2.5 years. The victim, a 16-year-old boy who was going to Bishop Youngblood for counseling sessions at the church. The sexual abuse, according to the criminal complaint, happened in Youngblood's church office and bathroom.
If it is, proven, it's horrendous. It's, worse than horrible. What can I say?
The victim, now 21, told police that the abuse started in 2009 and ended in 2011 when he was a freshman in college, and told Youngblood he didn't want to be counseled by him anymore. Youngblood reportedly asked the teen not to tell his mother because he didn't want to get into trouble. Youngblood is a convicted sex offender for an offense he committed in 2002 with a 15-year-old boy who had been going to the pastor for counseling sessions. In 2006, Youngblood even wrote this book, Freedom from Homosexuality, No Longer Living the Lie, which chronicles his own stories and the enemy's plan against him.
I know, no surprise. We do these stories all the time, but when there's this much hypocrisy involved, you have to point it out. Dwayne Youngblood with the Higher Call World Outreach Church outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, has molested a boy. Okay, nothing unusual there. But Youngblood not only wrote a book in 2006 called Freedom from Homosexuality, No Longer Living a Lie, in which he reveals his secrets from walking away from the homosexual lifestyle, but Youngblood was also accused of molesting another 15-year-old boy just before he published the book. I guess some tigers just don't change their stripes. And these stories come up so constantly, and people are always surprised when these holy rollers, the ones who speak out against homosexuality and how horrible and awful it is and how much you can walk away from it, these are always the ones who've got their hands in the cookie jar, or dick in the altar boy, depending on how you look at it. Why does anybody ever get surprised at this?
Well, I'm not certain because, one problem is now he's alleged to have done this. I don't think it's gone to trial yet. So for now, he's alleged to have committed this most recent offense. But, any law enforcement officer will tell you that these kind of positions, teacher, pastor, anything where you're sitting with somebody in a position of confidence is tailor-made for sexual abuse. Because you're dealing with vulnerable people who are coming to you for help and may not be willing to go to the authorities because honestly they're afraid and they're vulnerable.
Oh, exactly. Last week we talked about the church that hired the registered sex offender, and they were surprised because he raped another boy. Well, here's another case of a church that employs a known registered sex offender, and apparently does nothing to keep him away from children. What's going on, guys? Are you just completely unaware that this stuff happens? Do you not read the news?
That goes to what are these people thinking? Why do they do this? When we talked about last week, we talked about the one guy and bringing this guy in, knowing the backlash the Catholics are going through and all the others, knowing that this is a problem. This is a problem within the church. The Catholics are having this problem. Other churches are having this problem. Why put yourself into the position of putting a pedophile or whatever this guy is, and who knows what this guy really is, putting him in a position to offend again and dragging their church into a potential lawsuit, or of course I'm sure there's going to be a lawsuit, putting this guy in this position, that should open him up for, at least some civil lawsuits and stuff like that. And why would you do that? Or at least if you know what's going to happen, you can, put a chaperone in the room, do something to maybe mitigate the situation. But no, this guy got a hold of a kid and 3 years, abused him. And I wish I could understand. I understand human nature, people for these, our pastors, our church leaders, our civic leaders, and so on, who kind of hold at it on a level that, and we expect them to be, pillars of the community. They represent, everything that's good and all this kind of stuff. And we kind of expect them to have higher moral standards and so on. And when they do stuff like this, it almost gives them a bye because they are these pillars, these ethical, moral pillars to the community. And, it's like, I just don't understand why when something like this happens, you just don't say enough's enough, get this guy out of here, get him, apparently he is going to jail, or looks like he's on his way to jail, or, again, it's alleged, but, something's going to happen to this guy, and do something about it. Somehow get the word out that you gotta be really careful about these people you bring in. If you want to do good things for people who've had a bad run or something like that, that's fine. But, be aware that this can happen again, and maybe some supervision or a chaperone may have been a more, a prudent, way. I don't know. I just, like I said, I just don't understand this, why anyone would do that and put somebody in that position to offend again.
Yeah, well, you gotta remember that most of these people, it's the really strident anti-gay crusaders that you really have to worry about. You can't stop being gay if you're gay. These gay re-education camps are ridiculous, and the theists who claim that you can just pray away the gay, as we see once again, they go right back to it the second they feel safe. Look at Ted Haggard, who spent lots of time after he got caught with a male prostitute saying, "Oh, I'm not gay, I'm better, I'm cured." Yet, he went and re-offended again. And then in a GQ interview in 2011, he admitted that now he's bisexual. Sorry guys, you can't pray away the gay.
Which is one of the problems you have here because, these people, obviously you're not going to come to a person to pray this away if you're comfortable with how you are, or the feelings you're having. And I think the other problem is, and this is an area where a lot of our popular, media kind of bears a little bit of blame, is even today, generally, if you see how sexual aggressors, sexual criminals are portrayed, the old jokes about Uncle Pervy, the creepy guy in the park, there's not a lot of preparation for people to understand that the majority of sexual offenses happen between acquaintances, family members, people who theoretically you should be, you should feel safe with. And so there's not a lot of understanding of what to do in that situation, especially again if you're somebody who, in this case, he started when he was 15 and you're uncertain enough as a 15-year-old, much less if you're trying to struggle through this. And like you said, what do? Do you accuse a pillar of the community? Unfortunately, we know historically that in many cases what happens is that the person accusing the pillar of the community gets outed as a liar and a terrible person and is completely ostracized.
Right. And as we've said a lot in a lot of other stories like this, the church tends to come to the defense of the pastor. They don't believe the victims. They tell the victims that they're all just a bunch of liars, and they will come to the defense of the pastors, even after the pastor has been convicted of the crime, and they're in jail. They'll still come back and say, no, this is a man of God. They could not possibly have done that.
Yeah, and this is one of the issues that you're seeing. I mean, it unfortunately is a problem. In this case, this man should never have been alone with a minor, not after his first conviction. You're right, because, this church is not looking very happy when it comes to any possible lawsuit, because being that he was a convicted and registered sex offender, I'm not certain, depending on how the law works, he might even been in violation of the conditions of, his sex offender status.
Right, which is what we talked about last week. I mean, in California, as a registered sex offender, you cannot be within 2,000 feet of a school or a park. And, as I pointed out, there's a lot of kids in churches. I would say that being within 2,000 feet of a church is probably something that you should not be allowed to do. I don't know how it is in Pennsylvania, but if they're not doing that, they're doing something wrong.
Yeah, no, I'll have to say, I myself have issues with a lot of registered sex offender laws. I mean, in many cases they're overbroad. There's no way to get off of the registry. But one of the problems is that whatever the law was, even if you like this guy, and let's face it, just because someone becomes a sex offender doesn't mean that people cannot still like them because, your brother, family member, whatever. The last thing you want to do is put them in a position where this temptation can rise. Because many sex offenders, they're defined by the AMA as, they have psychological issues that may make it very difficult for them to resist the temptation if it's put in front of them. So even if you're their friend, you really want to minimize that temptation. You're not doing them any favors if you don't.
Yeah, but here's this guy who writes this book that says, here's how I got out of this quote-unquote lifestyle and why I'm no longer gay.
Right. Now
this guy's just bullshitting himself into believing this.
Right, and that is an unfortunate point. One of the issues, by making homosexuality such an issue among this segment of the church, is that it creates a situation in which he has to say he's not gay. Most of these people find themselves having to say this even when they know it's not true, because there's no other out with this belief, which is an unfortunate, why I think a lot of these people are just getting so screwed up psychologically.
Exactly. But unfortunately we do see this kind of thing all the time. I mean, it's always these anti-gay holy rollers. Even George Riekers, who is a former board member of the National Association for the Research and Therapy of Homosexuality, here's a guy who was caught in an airport with a gay prostitute that he found on the website Rentboy. These people are getting caught continuously. And what's the old saying? The more you talk about it, the less likely it's true. These guys talk about how we're not gay. Gay is bad. All this other stuff. Dude, you're gay as the day is long. And you know it. And you're just saying this stuff because you're trying to convince yourself it's not true. But it's true. Let's be honest.
Yeah. And one of the unfortunate, because, as one point, just to show how completely discredited this is being, California, of course, passed a law, and I think the American Psychological Association has also declared that, anti-gay therapy or gay, rehabilitation therapy is now considered pseudoscience and abusive. There really is no way to, solve this. If a person, people can change over time, of course, but it's an internal thing. There is no way to make somebody's sexual orientation conform.
Right. Do you have anything else to add?
I've got nothing.
I just say I'd like to be the attorney on the other side that when they sue that church, because that church is not in a good place.
Yeah, well, none of these churches are. That's the funny thing is there's no real defense for this. You can't say, I didn't know, because you knew. You absolutely knew, and you still let them do it. And then you can't turn around and go, well, Or like the church, like the story last week where they were going, well, God forgives. Yeah, but the law doesn't. Sorry.
Well, I remember,
it's not God on the bench.
I remember the old joke, from when they were building Bible land, which is, they say render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and unto God what is God's, and Caesar wants a building permit. And in this case, it's Caesar wants a judgment.
Yeah, exactly. So another church down the tubes. One down, way too many to go.
Well, I'm afraid that if the congregation is like a lot of congregations, the church probably is not down the tubes. It will be, because again, this is why sometimes this conspiratorial outlook that Satan's out to get us is the gift that keeps on giving. Obviously, this is some plan by Satan who, for all you hear about him, is more powerful than God in some of these churches. But regardless, it's a plan by Satan, and, we just must keep our faith strong.
Yeah,
yep.
Our faith's being tested, that's all. Once it's over with, we're back in the good graces of God.
But it never quite happens that way.
Yeah. But like I said, the state's a little bit more hard-nosed.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And well-deservedly so. All right, well, let's go ahead and finish up our last story.
Yes. Babylonian tale of a round ark draws ire from Christian circles. A recently deciphered 4,000-year-old clay tablet from ancient Mesopotamia is putting a new spin on the biblical tale of the flood and Noah's Ark, and that it's causing consternation among some Christian fundamentalists. The book of Genesis includes detailed specifications for a giant boat on which all kinds of animals were placed 2 by 2 to shelter from 40 days and 40 nights of rain. The wooden ark was to measure about 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 30 feet high. And that's all well. The measurements don't add up. All well and good, but the specification listed in the Babylonian Ark tablet, which is now on display in the British Museum, are totally different. The Babylonian boat was supposed to be made of braided rope, stiffened by wooden spars, and sealed with bitumen. This was supposed to have a round base measuring 250 feet wide. It was really a heart-stopping moment. The discovery of the boat was to be a round boat. Irvin Finkel, a curator at the museum, told the Associated Press. That was a real surprise. When I saw this story, I go, oh, cool. There's, like with anything history, the neat stories. And, I'm kind of curious what the whole decipher is. I haven't looked that up yet. And actually, I've been doing a show about ancient civilizations on my podcast, looking at some of these ancient legends and some of the conspiracies. Actually, what it really comes down to is these people who believe that there's Atlantis, the civilizations on Mars, even some of the those that have argued that space aliens helped build the pyramids. What their main argument is that mainstream science is covering up their knowledge. And so it's kind of neat to see new stories, it's adding more to the model, adding more to the stories. And definitely, from going and researching the show, we don't know a lot about the Babylonians. We know a lot, in relative terms. We know the Egyptians a lot better than the Babylonians and, the Romans and the Greeks. Because they wrote, we got all their writings. We have a really good understanding of these. Babylonians are like next on the list of the Sumerians. So trying to understand more about the Babylonians, of course, and since the Babylonians appear in the Bible and referred to in the Bible, this is actually kind of a neat connection that perhaps the Christian versions of the flood story is maybe older than, what the Bible says, and maybe even older than what they think. And I thought this was a neat article. Actually, I had a different version of it, because all it said was Christians are up in arms, and there was a link, so I clicked the link, and sure enough, there's our buddy Ken Ham arguing that this thing is a forgery. He's literally saying that this is not a true statement because it's his same argument. My Bible says that the ark was this shape. It was 40 days, 40 nights, all this stuff. So that has to be a work of Satan.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
And, and then I go through, there's an Institute on Creation Research, and it's the same stuff again. It's like, they're questioning the source, and it's like the British Museum, and you got an expert deciphering it. How much more proof do you want? Do you want to dig up the guy who wrote the thing, and question him somehow? I don't know.
He was possessed by the devil when he wrote it and thus faked it, knowing that it would be dug up this time.
ICR really hasn't done anything interesting for years. They were the original creation research group, started out in Santee, California, started by Henry Morris and Dwayne Gish, who both recently died, but they were really old fucks and good riddance to them. But they ended up moving to Texas a while back after California refused to give them any tax credits or whatever, and they've pretty much been laughable the whole time. But yeah, it's a group that Ken Ham has been involved with all along. It's all kind of the same incestuous cabal kind of creationist fucktards, I guess.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It really is.
One of the things is, now, we must remember, this is Ken Ham who says we need to shut down the space program because there can be no aliens because Jesus doesn't come to aliens. One of the things here is that this is I won't say it's unique to American evangelicals, but most traditional Christian religions were fully on board with the fact that, there's a lot of stuff, especially in the Old Testament, that was written as allegory and tale and intended to be read as allegory and tale. Most Jewish scholars do not worry that the ark had to be made, or even that the tale was based on anything at all. So you've got here, once again, a particular brand of American religious thought, which unfortunately is spreading in some areas, that says that no, if it was written in the Bible, it has to be, that's how it is. Exactly. I mean, never mind the fact that the Bible they're reading from is a translation or a modification of the King James Bible, which was a translation, of God knows how many iterations.
Right. I mean, we've known for a long time, at least those of us who care about evidence, that the Noachian flood was not an original tale. It was borrowed, and by borrowed I mean stolen wholesale, from other local flood traditions. I mean, in fact, there's very little in the story that actually came from the Hebrews. There's portions that we can demonstrably prove predate the very existence of the Hebrews as a distinct sect that appear nearly verbatim in the biblical account. There's one that I pointed out a long time ago. There's an account, the story in the Bible where Noah's sons found him naked, and it shows how he split up all the land. That story, it appears word for word in Hindu texts that predate any existence of the Hebrews. They just stole it. But Christians don't get that.
Yeah, well, and you'll get, like the Jesuits probably, I don't take a literalist viewpoint. The literalist viewpoint, and I think that's another reason why, a lot of American churches are having problems. Because if you demand that you believe everything in the Bible 100% as, literal truth, it really falls apart. I mean, it falls apart like a house of cards really quickly, especially when you notice that various books of the Bible contradict each other. And this is an area, this is just one case, it gets to their desire to have everything be about them. The devil's out to get you personally. And it's also a case where they're once again picking a fight they can't lose. Just, like all the searches for Noah's Ark. Google's done terrible things to people, especially Google Maps.
Yeah, Google Earth, where you can just zoom in and look at all this stuff that you claim was Noah's Ark, and it's not.
And of course, the other problem is, and this is one issue I had, by the way, I'm going to hell. I'm an Episcopalian, but I'm going to hell according to the person I was talking to.
You're not an Episcopalian, come on.
Can I be a Unitarian then? They have all the fun parties. The person I was talking to, he was mentioning worldwide flood, and one problem you gotta think of is that when we talk about little floods, like the one in, let's use the New Orleans flood. We said that was only part of Louisiana because we have airplanes, we have CNN, we have satellites. But if you were, say, living back in the days where you had none of that, it was just you, your cow, and a little raft, you're going to be looking around saying, oh my God, the entire world must be flooded. Because as far as you can see, it's flooded. And this is one thing that people miss a lot is that, world doesn't necessarily mean the entire world. It may just mean everything we see.
Right, but then you have to assume that if you say that, then these people could be fallible. They could be wrong.
Right.
And I always love the people who will go, they'll point to like the Black Sea flood, for instance, and they'll go, oh look, we can prove that there was this Black Sea flood, and wow, that must have been what they described in the Bible. Therefore, the Bible is true. And I'm going, no, because that's not what it described in the Bible. The Bible specifically describes every single high mountain was covered. The only way that that can be true is if it was a worldwide flood. Because I'm sorry, you can't cover every mountain, including Ararat, without having a pretty damn expansive flood.
Yeah.
But they'll pick and choose what they like to see.
And, and of course it is very much, it's a theme that does pop up several times in the Bible of the destruction of the unrighteous. You get it again with Sodom and Gomorrah. But, that's another case where it's interesting that according to some, just to show how literalists sometimes miss it, according to some Jewish schools, the problem with Sodom and Gomorrah was that Lot didn't argue hard enough. He didn't save the cities. And this is one thing that a lot of literalists don't get, is that especially the Old Testament is not to be read as Holy Writ. You're supposed to read it as a series of conversations. That's why, most Jewish, writings have such extensive commentary around the actual text.
Right. Well, I mean, I did a really long and detailed deconstruction of the flood story a long time ago on this podcast, and so I put links to the 2 episodes, which, I mean, it's episodes 7 and 9, if people believe it. So if anybody wants to go back and hear what's actually wrong with the flood story in a lot of detail, plus where all these tales actually came from, I did put in like where that Hindu story came from and where they got a lot of this crap. By all means, please go back and listen to those. It stops us from doing that whole thing again.
And it's one of the things that I would like to mention that, this is not a controversy in any scholarly manner. There is nobody with any level of scholarly knowledge who doubts that flood was actually an allegory, that it was not a real single event.
Well, yeah, but there's nobody with any amount of knowledge who thinks that 99% of the stuff in the Bible was real. They don't think people were walking on water and raising the dead and, coming back as a Jewish zombie god, whatever. Nobody believes any of this stuff if you've got a clue. It's only the people who don't have a clue, and let's be honest, Christians are clueless. They've got no idea of the history of their myths, and they're not going to accept that any of their stories are in fact myths. Getting back to our buddy Ken Ham, I mean, he's out there, as usual, leading the charge for ignorance. He continues to prove he's a complete idiot and a laughingstock. I don't understand why anybody listens to him.
Well, in truth, I can see why a lot of people listen to the literalists because, right now it's kind of a scary time for a lot of people. Technology's changing, the world is changing. And so for a lot of people, finding something that they can hang on to and say, this is true 100%, is probably extremely comforting. I'm not certain if Ken Ham is an idiot or if he's just a very, very, very clever person who's making a ton of money. Of course, the two are not always mutually incompatible.
Well, he's not making a ton of money because the Art Park is going away and the Creation Museum is going bankrupt.
Oh.
So he's losing. He's losing.
Did he put his personal funding in that, or is...
I hope so. I hope he loses every penny he's got.
I remember, I did have a friend who was a veterinarian and just said that when they were doing the diagram of the ark, she just said that would never ever going to get passed by, animal safety regulations, animal you're not going to stuff a bunch of animals in a big wooden box, not any place in the United States.
Yeah. And the OSHA rules.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just, it amazes me just how gullible and stupid these people are. And even when you point out how gullible and stupid they are, and when you present all the evidence that proves how gullible and stupid they are, they continue to be gullible and stupid.
Yeah. Well, again, it gets back to the devil did it. The devil made us do it. The devil said, what's interesting is how heretical a lot of these groups are when you realize that they seem to assume that the devil pretty much runs the earth 100%. That there is really no presence. They talk about God in the church, but the way they act about it is that, the devil is the only motivating force on earth. And, granted, it gives you a lot of excuses when things go wrong, but it's...
Yeah, well, you gotta remember that these people really treat God like an incompetent boob. They spend all their time saying, well, God is so powerful and just and all this other stuff. And yet all this stuff goes wrong, and they have to make excuses for why God is so weak and incompetent and stupid and can't actually accomplish anything.
God will punish the gays by unleashing a hurricane on the Bible Belt. Okay.
Yeah. Which takes out a lot of churches, which they don't seem to mention.
And this is an issue, that is probably, we had this big explosion of evangelical churches, in the 80s, starting in the 70s and then, through the 80s. And I think that, as the numbers are showing, it's at the tail end of its influence right now. And that could also be another reason why you're getting an increasing amount of crazy, because let's face it, if you have 100 people and 90 people leave, the last 10 people in the club are usually the really dedicated ones.
Right, we've talked about that before, where the only reason we're seeing all the crazies is because all the normal people already left. and they just happen to now be the majority.
Yeah, and there's a guy named Fred Clark. He does a Slacktivist blog. And one of his beliefs is that a good chunk of this is because so many of these churches, it's about gays, it's about Satan. There were a few other things he talked about, but largely a lot of these churches have ceased to have anything of real worth to people just coming in looking for some form of comfort.
Well, right, because they have to appeal to the extremists.
Right.
Because they're the only ones left, and these people have to keep money coming in the door to keep the lights on.
You know, and they're also getting hurt because they're increasingly losing their grip on the educational thing, because not long ago, the UC system said that if you come from certain schools, I think Bob Jones University was one of them, we're not going to accept your graduation as getting into the UC system. And this just got to, because again, you have this complete refusal to engage with scientific reality.
Right. All right, well, how's about we go ahead and get to the main event?
Let's get to the main event.
All right.
This is the main event.
This week, our guest Charles wanted to talk about the recent DC gun case and its implications. Now, we've talked about guns and gun control before, but maybe it's time to revisit the topic in light of this new case. So, Charles, you're up.
Okay, well, DC lost in the district court, and their gun law is now not in abeyance because the judge just today agreed to stay his order so that they will still be enforcing the law as it is, and probably they're trying to decide whether they want to write laws to comply with the judge's ruling or appeal it on up, I think, to the Fifth Circuit and then hence to the Supreme Court. If they're smart, I don't think they're going to do that because this ruling is actually a fairly limited ruling. As you read from the various news organizations, it is being proclaimed by gun control advocates as people are going to start walking around D.C. with chain guns. And gun Second Amendment advocates are arguing that, this is the coming of the new age of Aquarius. Neither's true. It's a limited ruling. What it is, and the backstory of this is that D.C. originally banned handguns entirely. You could keep a gun in your house as long as it either had a lock on it or it was dismantled. And then a case came up called District of Columbia versus Heller in 2008. And that said, no, there is an individual right to own a gun. You cannot ban somebody from having a gun in their home. There's a few other things there, but it's important because it did pretty much once again put the court on the side that the Second Amendment is an individual right, not a right just to be as part of a militia. So DC said fine. Then they changed the law to say that you cannot carry a handgun in the District of Columbia unless you have a permit. And here's where the Washington city government kind of fell on their face. They removed the authority of the city government to grant permits. So you need a permit to have a gun in the city unless you're a military or police official. But equally, now there's nobody who can give you a permit. And this was pretty much the basis of which the court ruled on. The court held, the judge in this case, held that this just is not on. You cannot have this happen and then remove the legal way to get a gun permit. So, the good news is that you can get a gun in DC now, presuming they don't appeal and that the higher courts don't overturn this particular decision. So that's good from gun rights. However, equally, the judge did not say that you just have to hand out gun permits to anybody who asks. And he left that actually, he left the question of what type of restrictions on your right to carry a gun would pass constitutional muster. There are a lot of states that have had carry permits with pretty restrictive conditions on them. California, for example, you can't get a concealed carry or in some areas an open carry if you have a conviction for domestic violence, if you have a restraining order, if you were committed involuntarily to a mental health institution. There's a fair number of restrictions that the city can put into its regulations that will ensure that nobody's walking the streets shooting at the little green men who are chasing him.
Which, that would be more along Mike's line.
Yeah. But what I think makes this important, and the reason and there was one other thing that this case did. One individual sued because he argued that it violated his right to travel because he was not a resident of DC, and DC won't offer a permit to anyone who is not a resident. So he said that this violates my equal protection clause and my right to travel. at the time of this case, what the judge said is that those claims are not right, which means at this point, since he doesn't know what the city's going to do in the future, it's premature to bring those particular claims to a court, to a legal action. So that particular plaintiff is going to have to wait to see what DC does before he can bring that back.
Right.
But what I like about this case, and why I think both gun rights activists and gun control activists can see this as a win, is that for gun right activists, a big problem has been that they have long been afraid that gun control is just an easy backdoor to gun elimination. And to be honest, let's face it, they do have a point, because this was a case where you were trying to ban guns, but not officially saying you're banning guns, so you don't get in trouble with the Supreme Court again. But it was a de facto ban on the right to carry. So that's good for gun rights advocates. It's a court once again saying that no, the Second Amendment is a real thing. You've got to abide by the Second Amendment. You don't get to just skittle past it. For gun control advocates, however, and I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of places and a lot of people who we probably do not want to carry guns. But gun control advocates, although they're upset at this right, should look at it also as a case of a court is now saying that short of that absolute ban, you can put legitimate restrictions on an individual's right to carry in the District of Columbia. I mean, one mentioned that one court said is that, for example, if you say it's illegal to carry guns into a school, you know, some states have no guns in school laws, that the Supreme Court and other courts have already ruled that the damage to your freedom in that case is you just don't have to bring a gun onto the campus. So it does not break the constitutional protections for your right to own and bear guns. So a lot of noise about this, but it's actually a pretty good ruling, in my opinion, for both sides. I mean, not for the extremists of both sides, mind you. But
yeah, unfortunately, I was looking going, you know, I've got, on the one side, you've got the extremist liberals who are probably shitting bricks, and then on the other side, you've got the conservative and libertarian gun crazies who, you know, think they should be able to carry around a howitzer on their backs.
Yeah, and you know, this has been a problem. One of the problems with this issue is there is such a lack of goodwill between the two sides. I mean, there was that incident a while back with guys carrying guns into, rifles into some diners. And even the NRA said, look, you know, we want you to have the right to carry a gun into a diner if you have to, mainly because if you just came back from hunting, there's a whole load of legal and liability concerns with just leaving a rifle in your car. Not to mention the fact that, you know, you may not want to leave your $1,500 rifle in a gun rack when you're not around your car, because somebody may decide to break the window and take your gun and cut it, you know. But they said that, on the other hand, you had guys deliberately going into these places with, you know, various types of weapons just because they could, which did not present a good image to people who might be unnerved about this. And this is a problem on both sides. Several years ago, some gun control advocates for a New York newspaper published the addresses of gun owners in New York, because those are publicly available records. So they put out a little map here. And, you know, on both sides, this is a case where you're seeing a severe lack of willingness to try to come together and engage and come up with a reasonable solution for both sides.
Well, that's because in the U.S. today, we don't have reasonable people. We've just got two extreme groups.
I mean, you know, and I'll tell right out on the podcast, you know, I don't own a gun. I don't own a gun because some people who know me know I got a temper. And temper plus gun does not to happy places lead. So I don't have a gun as my personal choice. I'm not about to turn around and say, because I personally do not feel that a gun would be a good idea for me, I'm going to tell everybody else in my neighborhood, you cannot have a gun. Because there's a lot of things here that, you know, individuals may not do that should not make them illegal.
Yeah, I don't have a gun because I don't have any interest in it. I do, on the other hand, have a number of very nice, sharp swords, and if you want to come and try to invade my house, I'm a lot more dangerous with those than I am with a gun.
Well, and you know, that's an interesting area, because that gets into a lot of this issue, because a lot of swords and things like that are illegal because they look scary, and that's another problem that gun rights advocates have, is that, you know, let's face it, a lot of laws controlling guns could better be called we're controlling scary-looking guns. We're not controlling dangerous guns, because honestly, the most dangerous gun out there would be a pistol, and it's generally most dangerous to the gun owner, not people around him. But a lot of states have passed, you know, assault rifle laws. We're trying to control scary-looking guns, which is not actually a legitimate rationale for a gun law. And, you know, unfortunately, this issue, it is a hot-button issue for a lot of people. I mean, you know, the Newton massacre was a horrific I mean, I'm not surprised that many people cannot really, it's hard to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to talk about this rationally when you just have that horrific massacre. But of course, one of the problems is that spree shootings are so rare, and most spree shootings that you get, I think the FBI defines a spree or a mass shooting as more than 4 victims. Most of those shootings are family. They're domestic disturbance incidents that went very, very poorly. But spree shootings in the sense that people like Newton or Columbine, they are actually so rare that it's really impossible to predict or sadly to prevent them.
Well, yeah, because we just happen to have a 24-hour news cycle today where we hear about them. They're not any more common today than they ever have been. But you're talking about, okay, maybe 1 or 2 a year. Well, how many thousands and thousands and thousands of schools are there in the U.S. where nothing ever happens?
Right. And it's kind of the sniper effect. Because, yeah, I mean, you hear about, little 5-year-olds sitting in their class getting ready to go to do their workstations and do their finger painting, and then a guy bursts in with a gun. That is honestly nightmare, personally for myself, nightmare causing horrible. But it's the sniper effect in that even though it's not common, it has such an impact completely out of line with how often it's likely to occur. Because, it gets back to what we talked about later is, parents will take their kids out of school or out of a park because they don't like the look of a guy in the park, and yet the child is far more likely to be abused by a family member.
Right. And of course, I mean, like you're saying, it was actually, they're after scary looking guns. The recent, shooting in Santa Barbara where the guy killed 4 people with a knife before he went out and killed more people with a gun. Nobody mentions the knife. Nobody cares about the knife. The knife is irrelevant, but they're screaming to get rid of the guns, aren't they?
Yeah, and one problem I have, and this is an area, because I'm kind of in the middle on this, which means I get yelled at by everybody. But one of the problems I have is that the newest thing is discussing, do we need to watch crazy people getting guns? And I dislike that because one of the biggest problems with people going poorly and going crazy or, mentally ill is that they're afraid to get help because they're afraid of being stigmatized, just not in a personal sense, but in an actually professional sense. And if you start mandating that mental health workers must report people who come to get mental help from them, they are going to stop going because they're going to be terrified of one day finding out I can't get a job because when they do the background check, it mentions that da-da-da-da-da is not allowed to have a gun because of, he said something to his psychologist back 10 years ago. I mean, the employer is going to take the easy route and not hire that individual.
Yeah, well, I don't think that we should just report people who have gone to see a mental health professional. I think we should definitely report people who go to see a mental health professional and the mental health professional is going, holy shit, this guy's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, well, one problem is, and I think this is an issue, is that whenever you're talking about curbing a right, and I mean, let's face it, the Second Amendment's a right, you have to start from the viewpoint of the government has to prove its case. It's like theoretically a defendant in the court doesn't have to say a thing. The government always has to prove its case. And in a lot of cases, partially because we're not just dealing with federal gun laws, but 50 states and God knows how many counties, it is being created more that the person must prove his right and worthiness to have. Now, I will admit that, and the courts have said that they're a little more lenient on the Second Amendment than other amendments because of the fact that there is a potential for risk to other people. But that doesn't give an open ground to people like DC. I mean, DC tried to pass a law that they should have known better because, before this case came down, there was a Chicago case that went up to, I think the Supreme Court, where Chicago, said that you have to have shooting time in a gun range before we'll give you a permit for a gun. And then they said, well, we're not going to have any gun ranges in the city. And the court said, no, that's once again making it too difficult. And this is the last thing I'm going to mention on this. And I think this is one reason that liberals should look at this case, because what you have a court saying is that you cannot get away with having a right that you can't carry out. Now, this has been fairly common, of course. A lot of times this is said in cases. But I think you need to look at how can you apply this to other rights. For instance, there's many states where while you have a right to an abortion or a right to contraception, they've done everything they can to make it a right that you cannot actually, carry out, and you cannot exercise. And this is one reason why I think that, looking at the Second Amendment is both on a positive viewpoint. You can use this to argue that increasingly we have to be very suspicious of the state trying to prevent you from exercising your right, but equally to realize that if you start weakening any amendments, any one of the rights with saying that we can kind of wiggle around it like this, you risk harming them all. And we've seen that. I mean, unreasonable search and seizure and probable cause are examples of rights that have just been completely gutted over the last 30 years.
Oh, absolutely. But those are things that have been gutted largely by the liberals. So.
Well, they've been gutted. I mean, the problem is that you'll never find, you'll never find a government that does not like the idea of being able to do more. Every government's going to push. And unfortunately, a lot of what happened with these two rights was that during the 80s, it was the war on drugs and wilding and all that other stuff. And, I hate to say it, but I also blame a lot of the American citizenry who sat there, watched the 30-minute show, and then obediently keeps voting people in who, use a lot of these rights for toilet paper.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been a couple of cases where, prosecutors keep getting voted back in, district attorneys, and yet their districts are spending millions of dollars because regular as clockwork, they come up, they've been withholding evidence from the defense team, signing bad search warrants, and, why are you voting these people back in?
Because incumbents get voted in no matter what?
Yeah. Well, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of cases, it's especially for district attorneys and judges, I don't think a lot of people even know who the heck they are. But yeah, this case, it's a limited case. I don't want to say too much because again, it's a very limited case. It's not carving new ground in the sense of trying to carve out a new right. But it is definitely carving out new ground in the sense that it's saying, once again, you really have to abide by this right. You can't try to sneak your way around it.
Mike, say something.
Oh, something.
I do that to my students, too, when I'm substitute teaching.
I haven't heard anything that I disagree with. I live just outside of Chicago, so I saw that whole mess come in and go away. I mean, Chicago has crime.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the way it was. And of course, the newspaper or the TV, if it bleeds, it leads. There was always some little kid being gunned down by a drug deal gone bad or, drive-by shooting and stuff like that. And Richie Daley pushed through this idea. I mean, these are Democrats, pushed through this, this ban on handguns and weapons. And it was like, of course, at Chicago, I mean, I don't know the whole details because, I live, maybe an hour or so drive from downtown, out in a rural area where everybody and his uncle has a gun in one form or another. And, it didn't really sound like all that big of a deal. Then you start hearing about, these Chicagoans going out to the suburbs where, somehow they were able to buy guns, no background checks, no anything, and I don't know, there was something weird, and there was more guns in Chicago after the ban than there was before, and then again, the shootings, the murder rates had went up a little bit. I mean, not a lot, I mean, but we were seeing a lot more shooting around schools, things like that, and I'm like, one thing that was always a mystery to me was, if this town has banned any handguns, and why are there still guns in the town? And it was always this, this really weird, it's like, what are these people thinking? And about every 2 weeks there'd be something on, late night radio. Yeah, they're going out to cities like Cicero and Lombard and all these places apparently they're able to get guns from there. A lot of times, these proxy purchases. I don't know what that whole deal was, but someone go into a store outside of the city limits, they buy the gun, take it into town, hand it off to a friend, and it's registered to that person who bought it, but it's now running around in Chicago, and no one was getting in trouble over it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, okay, yeah, you got this illegal, I mean, it was basically an illegal gun sale between not the store to the proxy, but the proxy to the guy in Chicago. Why aren't they putting these people in jail for violating these rules? So it's like, nothing really makes sense with, to me, nothing really makes sense with a lot of these gun control laws. And, I mean, I'm one who I would like to keep guns out of the hands of the people that really shouldn't have it. And if there's, like Cephas says, I want the truly crazy person not to have a gun. And, I get what you're saying about, having that on your record, an employer sees it. Yeah, but you know what, I would think somewhere in that record it says you're cured or you whatever. There should be something, but while you're in that state, you should never be able to get your hands on a gun. The Newtown thing wouldn't have made any difference because the guns were already in the house.
Yeah, there was no way that.
Yeah, so there was no, even if the kid was on antipsychotics or seeing somebody, at one moment he could have picked up a gun and that's what he did. He grabbed a gun and goes to the school. Personally, would like to see, cause that is part of the rules or at least the way I'm understanding it in Illinois, you have to be mentally competent to own a gun. And, it should be checked. Now, I don't remember if Illinois has ever had any shootings offhand, but, it's not something that pops up, so, it seems to be everywhere else. But certainly, apparently they don't do that check in Illinois. So, because it's under the HIPAA rules that you can't give out that information. So.
Yeah, and HIPAA is something hospitals do not want to, this is a problem that the hospital has, is even if the state tells them you have to report or the local jurisdiction, there's still federal law that they have to deal with. And, I'm looking at Illinois, one of the problems is that in Illinois, looking at the statute right now, is that it says that if he has been a patient in a mental hospital within the past 5 years and has any firearms or firearm ammunition in his possession, or he is mentally retarded and has any firearms or firearm ammunition in his possession. One of the problems, and this is an issue that is common with a lot of the states, is that I'm not seeing a good definition of patient in a mental hospital. There are people who go to mental hospitals for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with whether or not they pose a threat to themselves or others. Mentally retarded, there's probably a definition of that somewhere in the Illinois code. I don't know what it would be, but equally that's another case where one of the issues I think with guns, and this is something that foreigners a lot of times have a hard time with, that there's so many different jurisdictions, is that if we're going to define this, and I'm not automatically opposed to it, but I would like to see it have, the kind of regulatory and procedural protections and a uniform definition across the United States. Because one issue with our patchwork of gun laws is it's possible for a guy to pack a gun, be perfectly legal in Arizona, cross over to California, and be immediately committing a felony.
Right.
Or driving through California. And they get to some place where it isn't. So he's not even aware that he just broke some laws. He's coming back, boom, he's busted,
Right.
He didn't know any better. And, if you've listened to this show, I always try to make clear that I'm talking Illinois because I know the laws, it seems to be varies from state to state. What is true in California is not true in Illinois. And I'm hearing, there's some stuff going on here in Michigan. I think there was just some new rules about, I think it had to do with, hunting permits. But, there doesn't seem to be any real standard or any type of, or a model law or whatever. I don't know. I don't know how
a model law would be a good example. And one of the problems again is because the discourse is so poisoned on both sides, it's very hard for a politician to try to present a law that would be reasonable without getting hit from both sides. And let's face it, so many politicians fall on one side or the other of this debate. You're not going to, the mayor of Chicago is not going to try to come up to a law who seriously addresses both sides' concerns. Neither is the governor of Arizona. They are both on, they both have their own backers. And one of the problems I think in this case is that, we need some kind of model law, and preferably something that the federal government or is defined as the bottom of the floor across all 50 states. You have this regulation which will apply everywhere. I don't see that happening though. And the funny thing is that murder rates are down. Homicide is falling, and even when you get an uptick in the homicide rates, they're nothing like they were, I think, in the 70s. And again, we get back to people growing up in the 1950s, which is ask, what is this strange paradise where there is such small amount of gun violence? But we hear about it all the time. a shooting in Chicago is front page news on the CNN where I'm sitting in California.
Yeah. Oh, and Mike, I did look, and you are forgetting about the Northern Illinois University shooting in 2008.
Yeah, there was that one.
Yeah.
There was that, yeah.
Fifth deadliest university shooting in U.S. history.
And,
so.
that's a problem as someone at a school because, again, it gets into it. One of the issues you're going to have to look at is a lot of campuses don't want to get rid of their students. And in some cases, you do have laws that will pretty much mandate the expulsion of a student for certain mental health issues. And I really think that one of the things that's got to be done is a unification of the laws so that you can safely say, hey, if I as a psychologist am bringing this to a court, I know what the standards are for bringing it to a court. I've complied with all the standards for bringing it to a court. Now there will be a sealed court case where we determine if that's the case, because the potential, given the stigma associated with mental health issues in this country, for abuse and accidental own goals is pretty high. And I think that one of the best things we could do would be to establish a firm, nationwide standards for reporting on this.
Yeah, but like I said, with the 24-hour news cycle,
No,
you'll never get that. And let's be honest, they're just trying to get ratings anyway. So,
well, yeah, I mean, if you take a look at CNN these days, I mean, to be honest, I hardly look at CNN anymore because seriously, just as a personal thing, I know children die in locked cars. I don't need to see it when I'm getting ready to have breakfast because there is nothing I can do about it. And that's one of the problems I have with a lot of our news is that they love to put out stories that there's nothing to be done. I mean, something horrible happened to one person out of 320 million people. There will always be something horrible happening to one person out of 320 million people.
Yep. But that's kind of how the U.S. goes today, and it's unfortunate, that we were talking about earlier that, it's just so polarized. You're either on the far left or on the far right, and rational, moderate people in the middle just have nothing to talk about anymore because the media doesn't cater to anybody, and the politicians, they don't cater to anybody who's rational in the middle. They're only dealing with the extremists on the ends.
Yeah. And the sad thing is I hate to say it, if I want to get very good commentary about domestic American issues, half the time I either go to Al Jazeera or the BBC because I know I'm not going to get it from CNN or the New York Times.
Right. Yeah, it's just sad these days. I don't know what to do about it, but,
Well, I'll tell you, if I ever become Lord Emperor of the United States, you know what my plan would be. But apocalyptically, probably. But yeah, I mean, and it is an issue, and I think that, part of it, of course, is so new. I mean, let's see, everybody basically has the internet. That's, less than a decade. I mean, it's been less than a decade since you could say the internet was truly ubiquitous. So, I think that we're just in a state where we're really having to adapt to the fact that we really do have continual knowledge of pretty much anything going on the planet.
Which is a good thing in general terms. It's just, you've got the people on the one side who don't want anybody to have knowledge, and that tends to be the religious, unfortunately. It's where, some countries, instead of actually dealing with the reality of the world, they decide, well, we're just going to cut off the internet and not let anybody know about it. And on the other side, you got the people who it's just complete information overload where there's no way to make an intelligent decision because you've got so much data at your hand and they're really insisting that everybody knows everything all the time. So there's got to be some kind of a middle ground. I just don't know where it is right now.
Yeah, and of course the problem is that you also get to the fact that, let's face it, the internet, it's very difficult to know if the site you're looking at is a reasonable site. I mean, one of the problems is, and this is something that is a problem in the American school system, which is coming back to bite us, is that there's very little work to teach people until they get to the college level on how to be critical thinkers, how to critically evaluate information.
Right, and by the time you get to that point, you're either so completely screwed up or
you've already
kind
of done it yourself. I mean, when I started doing primary source work, I already knew the difference between primary and secondary sources. But it's been a while since I've been doing anything in high school, but I don't think high school talks at all about the necessity to evaluate sources.
Nope, they don't.
Nope. And, this is a problem because let's face it, for $40, you can have a guy put together a great looking website that just lets everybody know that your institution for the, food processing of gerbils has been fully accredited by many higher groups that don't exist in reality.
Right.
And it's a problem both for culture and for politics because I don't think our issues on gun control would have gotten so serious if there had not been on both sides an ability to filter out the extreme. You know, on the one side you got the people saying the government's coming to take our guns and is going to kill us all. And on the other side you got people who will literally say, if you want to own a gun, you probably have dreamt about murdering people. And it's like, no. To bring up your thing, you live in a rural part of, Illinois?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't know how rural it is, but I know in a lot of rural areas people own guns for self-defense, because if you call 911, if the police are in a good position, they might be able to make it to you in 30 or 40 minutes.
Right. Exactly.
And so that's a case where you're out here, you know, Riverside PD response time is a couple times I've called them has been within 2 or 3 minutes. So, you know, it's a completely different matter. And it's another case where a big city where people are always in each other's face, you know, that's always a dangerous situation, or people or areas with high levels of drunkenness, you know, you may have a different restriction on whether or not you want to be able to carry guns openly, and it could be a reasonable restriction that would not be reasonable in another area where those issues don't exist.
Yeah, which that kind of goes against being able to come up with a model law for everybody, because you just can't really do that.
Well, I think one of the problems that you would probably have to do is that a model law would probably be the very lowest restrictive level. Like, for instance, one thing I'd say in a model law is that any gun restrictions in an area that do not conform with the model law have to be very prominently posted. You know, because you get people driving in through areas where the law changes and there is no sign that the law has changed. Another thing that you might add would be a component of intent. You know, a lot of laws are based on intent. If a guy is driving through a state with a gun and he's traveling, his intent is obviously not to sell or use that gun in the state. He's simply moving through the state on his way somewhere else. And those are the kind of things that you need to limit this case, where you get people who completely unknowingly end up being charged with, you know, really heavy duty felonies. You know, there's a lot of felonies involved with gun laws in America that you don't want to mess with.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like that one guy, who wandered into Mexico with a gun accidentally recently, where there's no signs, there's nothing, there's no way to know that you're, you know, 1 minute you're in the United States and 1 minute you're in Mexico, and he's been in prison for
6 months, I think, yeah.
6-8 months now.
Yeah, he's, and that's causing a lot of issues. Personally, I'm kind of surprised that we just don't make a deal, because there's been cases before where the person's been transferred back to the U.S. and the trial continues, but they're just transferred back to the U.S. on their own recognizance. I mean, he's a Marine. He's obviously not a flight risk.
Well, where the hell is he gonna go?
Yeah, I mean, you know, he's just, and I'm not entirely certain. I think that what we may be seeing there is not so much anything having to do with America, but more the working out of local domestic politics.
Right, But that's a topic for another day, unfortunately, as we're going to start running pretty long pretty soon.
Well,
so do we have anything to wrap up?
I will say one thing is that I definitely want to see a fart demon at some point in a new thriller, because I mean that was probably the high point of this, the fart demons.
Yes, absolutely.
Should probably do kind of maybe some type of joke thing, like Ken Ham fighting the fart demon.
Oh,
I don't know.
Well, their movies have been doing pretty badly lately, so, you know, Ken Ham and the Temple of the Fart Demons could be a new addition to the Indiana Jones franchise.
Hey, might as well.
Let's go for it.
But just very, very odd. You know, I've always been used to weird things popping up, but fart demons was not something I expected to see anytime soon.
Yeah, but see here, it's a normal thing. It's every week. You don't run in the same weird circles we do.
Yeah, that's true. I mainly...
And we seek it out. We don't hide away from it either.
We seek the dark underbelly of the internet, and it is so very dark.
Yes.
Yes, unfortunately.
But,
the sights I've seen.
No,
and wish I could forget.
Yes.
Yes, there are things that we cannot unsee once we have seen them.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's go ahead and wrap it up.
Okay. Thank you much. And hopefully this did record and you're not just getting almost an hour of me going wow, 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 which could be a sign the devil doesn't want me to talk.
Yeah, okay.
But thank you much for having me on.
Well, anytime. Okay. All right, well, that's all there is. There just isn't any more this week, but never fear, we'll be back again next week. Thanks once again to my friend Charles for sitting in. And remember, if you have anything you'd like to say, anything you'd like to take us to task for, let us know and you can be on the show too. Go check out our website, and remember, we're available on Facebook, Google+, Twitter, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Player FM. Please send us comments and suggestions for future topics and do it in the right place, please. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you all next week. Take care all.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
You've been listening to the Bitchspot Report podcast with your hosts, Cephas and Mike. You can follow us on Twitter respectively at Bitchspot1 or at JDRipper1962. Please visit our website at report.jdragononline.com. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/The Bitchspot Report. We're also on Google+, iTunes, and YouTube. Those links are on our website. We'd love to hear from you. You can reach us via email at report@jdragononline.com. Comments, ideas, and suggestions are always welcome. We'll be back next week with another fun and fact-filled episode. Please tune in again.